The year is 2002, and Hunter was a small little 6-year-old boy. Usually at that age, I would watch cartoons and the likes during the day. However, once 8 p.m. hits, it was time to switch the channel to Spike TV or UPN and watch some good old-fashioned wrestling. Monday Night Raw and whatever the hell day SmackDown was on were the shows I absolutely loved to watch back then, even if they aired during a school night and I had to go to bed an hour later. But thankfully, I still knew what a VHS tape was. So we would record the recent new episodes of Raw or SmackDown overnight. No DVRs, no streaming services like Peacock, just some good old big tape player and some good old wrestling to keep me satisfied. And since WrestleMania season is right around the corner, I figured it wouldn't hurt to play some good old-fashioned WrestleMania video games. Let's go old school with this one. Back in the 80s, the WWF partnered with Acclaim Entertainment to release WWF games, and would still publish them up until the late 90s and early 2000s. The first WrestleMania game that came out was simply called, well, WrestleMania, featuring superstars like Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Ted DiBiase, Macho Man Randy Savage, Honky Tonk Man, and Bam Bam Bigelow. It's bad. All it is just mashing A and B, hoping that you'll be able to hit your opponents while you get your ass handed to you. It's nothing worthwhile. Also, it was developed by Rare. You know, the same people who made Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye and Conker's Bad Fur Day. Who knew? They also developed the follow-up named WrestleMania Challenge. It's mostly the same game, but with more superstars such as Ultimate Warrior, Big Boss Man, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, Ravishing Rick Rude, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. There's more game modes besides just one-on-one, such as Tag Team and a 3-on-3 Survivor Series. That being said, it's still not that fun. The gameplay is kinda similar to the Fire Pro Wrestling games that also came out around the same time. Now, I only played one FPW game, and that's Fire Pro Wrestling World, so I don't know too much about the series. But I do know that at least that game was kind of fun to play. WrestleMania Challenge, on the other hand, is not. It's also not that good. The controls are weird, and performing moves is difficult to pull off. And like before, you're more than likely getting pinned and losing the match more often. The last game that came out was WrestleMania Steel Cage Challenge, which came out in 1992 and was actually developed by Sculptured Software, or at least the NES version. It's possibly the best of the bunch. I like how whenever you get to select a superstar, their entrance themes play in an 8-bit rendition, which is cool. Outside of that, though, it's still more NES WWE, although there's a likely less chance where you won't lose as much. I wasn't really expecting anything good from these games, but then again, when I saw Acclaim or even LJN's logo when I started the games up, my expectations for these games were low, like Flowrider low. So, skip these games. Midway was no stranger for using realistic digitized characters for their video games, ranging from games like Pit Fighter, Narc, and of course the acclaimed fighting game series, Mortal Kombat. In 1995, WWF actually teamed up with Midway to develop WrestleMania the arcade game, which was a coin sucker back in the 90s, featuring the likes of Bret the Hitman Hart, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Razor Ramon, Bam Bam Bigelow again, Doink the Clown, Lex Luger, and Yokozuna. A fast-paced arcade wrestling game where a lot of crazy over-the-top stuff happens, like characters bleeding out hearts and dumbbells, and ridiculous moves like Undertaker shooting out ghosts or getting electrocuted by Doink's glove. You have two championships to go after, the Intercontinental and the WWF World Champion, and as you progress, the harder it gets, going from just 1-on-1 to a 2-on-1 handicap match, or heck, even a 3-on-1. It's a very interesting game, but one I actually enjoyed playing back in the day. Midway always knocked it out of the park with these kinds of games, and WrestleMania the arcade game is no different. It was even ported to home consoles by Acclaim and Sculpture Software again, and they did a pretty good job with this port. The PS1 is the one I remember playing the most. They would follow it up with WWF In Your House a year later, but it's not really that good compared to WrestleMania the arcade game, and it was pretty obvious that Acclaim tried to capitalize on the success of that game, but backfired tremendously. Still, if you want to play a goofy wrestling game, then I think WrestleMania the arcade game is one you should not skip out on. Give it a shot. Ah yes, now we're really getting into the good stuff. As someone who grew up with the N64 back in the day, we grew up with some of the best wrestling games on the system. WCW NWO Revenge was the one I grew up with as well, and I liked it. But we all know that WWF No Mercy truly was the dominant wrestling game of all time, and one that AEW completely failed to replicate. Whoops, did I say that out loud? But in between those two games, we had WrestleMania 2000, released in 1999. Yeah, that's weird, especially due to the fact that it wasn't really WrestleMania 2000, but rather WrestleMania 15 that happened in 1999. But to be fair, it's better releasing it now and not when the actual WrestleMania 2000 came out, because the actual WrestleMania 2000 was like getting blood spilled all over you, or in Kevin Nash's case, right next to him. WrestleMania 2000 for the N64 is another one I remember playing a lot as a kid. If you played the old WCW games or WWF No Mercy for the N64, then you'll have no problem playing this one. There are plenty of things to do in this game, ranging from different wrestlers to play as, different match types, and different game modes. Unlike WrestleMania, the arcade game, on the other hand, WM 2000 is a lot more realistic with its movement. You can move the character with the N64 D-pad, press B to do a strike, and press A to do a grapple. The longer you hold down the buttons, the stronger the attacks become. And if you have your momentum meter filled up all the way, you can use the analog stick to unleash your special move to lay the smackdown on your opponents, going for the pin and winning the match. It's satisfying hearing the crowds count with the referee, and hearing the N64 quality wrestlers theme that plays is also very satisfying. Give credit to the devs, they did a good job showing off the wrestlers' entrances, even if the Titantrons are low quality in loops. Visually speaking, I think the game looks fine enough as it is. It hasn't aged well graphically, but back in the 2000s, this looked pretty damn good for an N64 wrestling game. Like with WrestleMania, the arcade game, 2000 still holds up very well. Visually speaking, I think the game looks fine enough as it is. It hasn't aged that well graphically speaking, but back in the 2000s, this looked pretty damn good for an N64 wrestling game. Like with WrestleMania the arcade game, 2000 still holds up very well to play. Although I still recommend you play No Mercy more, it wouldn't hurt to also play this one and see where the inspirations for No Mercy came into play. It's a good WWF game for the N64, and one that I still hold true to my heart for being underrated. Don't skip out on this one too. WrestleMania X8 was released for the GameCube in 2002, right after the pay-per-view itself. It was also the first WWF game to be released for the Nintendo GameCube. Rather than being developed by Aki Corporation, who developed the WWF games for the N64, Yuke's was tasked in developing this one, and the SmackDown games for the PlayStation consoles as well. But they still managed to hire some people who worked at Aki to develop the game similar to the old N64 games, as opposed to Yuke's SmackDown titles. This would also be the last game to use the WWF logo before changing it to the WWE, as both Vince and the Worldwide Fund for Nature, also known as WWF, had a lawsuit during that time. There were a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on with the company back in the early 2000s, including the Stone Cold walkout that happened right as this game was finished, which might explain why The Rock showed up on the cover during the game's re-release to add the WWE logo. WrestleMania X8 is definitely an oddball of a game. It's not bad, but you can easily tell that even with the help from some people at Aki, the game was rough. Once again, there's a casual season mode, or Path of Champion, in which you can compete for whatever belt you choose to desire. The World Champion, Intercontinental, European, Hardcore, and Tag Team, just to name a few. But yet no Women's Championship, despite the fact that it's also present in the game inside another game mode, Battle for the Belts, which includes fictional belts, but also some real belts from other promotions, like the IWGP or NWA Heavyweight Champion, just to name a couple. Now, if you're expecting this to be like the N64 games, then you're in for a bit of a surprise. The N64 games felt more grounded, but also had a slow-moving feel to it. But WrestleMania X8 is a lot more fast-paced, sort of like the PS1 SmackDown games or the WrestleMania arcade game as mentioned before, except without the freaky-looking moves. It's mostly the same control scheme as before, pressing B to do a strike attack while A to do a grapple. The longer you hold them, the more powerful they get. But now, instead of using the analog stick to do your special, since you're literally using it to move the character around, you instead have to press A and B together to use your finisher. Use it and pin your opponents 1, 2, 3. It's alright, nothing too groundbreaking. There's obviously better WWE games I can strongly recommend even on Nintendo hardware. It wouldn't hurt to give this game a shot, but I wouldn't go heads over heels for it. 1 year later, WrestleMania 19 was released for the Nintendo GameCube as well. This one is also similar to WrestleMania X8, only instead of having a career mode, now instead you have revenge mode, where you end up getting fired from the WWE. You and Stephanie, for some reason, are going to get revenge on Vince McMahon. Now, I don't know why you're getting revenge on Vince McMahon, why you got fired, or why Stephanie is here, but the latter I would have to assume has something to do with the I Quit match that happened at No Mercy 20 years ago. All it is completing a series of tasks like destroying a specific amount of items, or defending the wrecking ball controls, or literally killing people by throwing them off of buildings in a specific amount of time. WWE, then, now, forever, together. These missions are kind of annoying. You end up getting crowded by enemies, and even if you eliminate them, literally, new ones show up in their place. And the camera is also horrendous. I hate the missions where you have to climb on an object and then swing, hoping you land or grab onto another pole at the right moment. Some of them can be done quickly, while others will take you God knows how many tries to do it. It's tedious. Besides that, though, the game itself is pretty much the same as WrestleMania X8. It has the same control scheme, new match types, and a different amount of roster, but it's mostly the same game. Nothing else to say, really. And about another year later, it happens again with WWE Day of Reckoning, a game that I personally enjoy a lot more than WrestleMania 19 and WrestleMania X8 in my opinion. That is honestly, at least for me, the definitive WWE GameCube game, and you should all play that one. I might talk about it one day, but I think I've had enough wrestling fill for this video.
There are several missions you need to carry out.
There's a ton of other WrestleMania games out there that I haven't covered or talked about in this video. There's WrestleMania for the Amiga, the Road to WrestleMania games on the GBA, Legends of WrestleMania, and WrestleMania 21 for the Xbox. But I think I covered enough anyway. It was fun to revisit.